The rain was coming down in sheets that Tuesday evening when Marcus drove off, leaving me standing under the flickering neon sign of Pete's gas station on Highway 9. I watched his red Honda disappear into the storm, my jacket soaked through, my arthritis screaming from the cold. 20 minutes I waited before the reality hit me. My own son had abandoned me 60 miles from home without a second thought. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. That moment changed everything. What Marcus didn't know was that his cruel decision would cost him $2 million and teach him the hardest lesson of his 26-year-old life. The whole mess started 3 days earlier when my car broke down outside my insurance office in Riverside. The transmission finally gave up after 180,000 miles, leaving me stranded in the parking lot with a briefcase full of client files and no way to get home. I called Marcus first, naturally. He was my only child, and despite our complicated relationship, I always turned to him when I needed help. "Dad, I can't right now," he'd said when I explained the situation. "I'm in the middle of a raid with my guild. Can't you just call an Uber or something?" An Uber? $60 to get home because my son couldn't pause his video game. But I'd paid for that game, just like I'd paid for the computer he was playing it on, the internet connection, the apartment rent, and pretty much everything else in his life for the past 8 years since he'd graduated college and decided that working was beneath him. "Never mind," I'd told him, "I'll figure something out." I ended up calling a taxi, watching $43 disappear from my wallet while Marcus continued his digital adventures. The driver was a kind Pakistani man named Ahmed, who helped me carry my briefcase to the door and refused a tip when he saw me counting my remaining cash. "Family should help family," he'd said simply. "This is not right." If only Ahmed could have explained that to Marcus. The next morning brought more of the same. I needed to get to the Ford dealership to sort out my car situation, then to the bank for a meeting about refinancing my mortgage. Simple enough tasks, except I had no transportation. I swallowed my pride and called Marcus again. "Seriously, Dad, I told you I'm busy today. I've got this interview thing online at 2. "What interview?" This was the first I'd heard of any job prospects. "It's for this streaming thing. Could be big money if it works out. I can't miss it for car stuff." Streaming. Another one of his get-rich-quick schemes that would require months of expensive equipment purchases and generate exactly zero income. I'd already funded his cryptocurrency trading phase, his drop-shipping business, and his attempt at becoming a social media influencer. Each venture had the same result. My bank account got lighter while Marcus got more convinced that traditional employment was for suckers. "Marcus, I need to handle some important business today. Can't you reschedule?" "Dad, you don't get it. This could change everything. Why don't you just rent a car or something?" Rent a car? More money out of my pocket because my son couldn't spare 3 hours to help his father. I hung up and called Enterprise, watching another $120 vanish for a daily rental. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was spending more money in 2 days on transportation than Marcus had earned in the past 6 months. By Wednesday evening, my patience was wearing thin. The dealership had quoted me $4,000 for transmission repairs on a car worth maybe $6,000. The bank meeting had gone well enough, but I still needed to gather more documentation for the refinancing application. I was tired, frustrated, and dealing with a flare-up of the arthritis in my hands that made driving increasingly uncomfortable. That's when Marcus called with what he probably thought was good news. "Hey Dad, remember that streaming interview? They want me to drive up to Portland tomorrow for a follow-up meeting. Pretty cool, right?" Portland was 4 hours away. "That's great, son. How are you getting there?" "Well, that's the thing. I was hoping I could borrow your car, but since it's broken, maybe I could use the rental?" The rental car, the one I was paying for because he wouldn't help me in the first place. I could feel my blood pressure rising. "Marcus, I need that car tomorrow. I have appointments." "Come on, Dad. This is my big break. Your stuff can wait another day, can't it?" My stuff? 40 years of building an insurance business, maintaining the home he'd grown up in, managing the finances that kept his comfortable lifestyle possible. All of it was just stuff that could wait while he chased another fantasy. "I tell you what," I said, trying to keep my voice level, "why don't you come pick me up in the morning? We can drive to Portland together, I'll handle my business while you do your interview, then we can drive back." The pause on his end was telling. "Dad, that's really not going to work. I need to focus on this opportunity. Can't you just take the day off?" Take the day off? From the business that paid for his rent, his food, his internet, his entire existence. I was 71 years old and still working 60-hour weeks, partly because I loved what I did, but mostly because Marcus's lifestyle required it. "Fine," I said, "but I need you to drive me to a few places first thing in the morning. Then you can take the car to Portland." Another pause. "How early are we talking?" "I need to be at Riverside Financial by 9 for a meeting with my accountant." "Dad, that's like an hour drive each way. I was hoping to get on the road by 10 at the latest." Of course he was. Everything in Marcus's world revolved around his schedule, his convenience, his priorities. The man who'd never held a job for more than 3 months was concerned about timing? "Marcus, I'm asking for 2 hours of your time. In exchange, you get to use a car that I'm paying for to pursue an opportunity that will probably amount to nothing, just like all the others." "You don't have to be a dick about it," he snapped. "Fine, I'll pick you up at 8. The line went dead. I sat in my kitchen, looking around at the home I'd worked decades to afford, thinking about the son I'd raised and supported and apparently failed completely. Tomorrow would be interesting. Marcus arrived at 8:15 the next morning, 15 minutes late as usual. He didn't apologize, just honked the horn twice and waited for me to come out. I grabbed my briefcase and the folder of documents I needed for the bank, locked up the house, and walked to the rental car where my son sat behind the wheel, already impatient. "Morning," I said as I got into the passenger seat. "Yeah, morning. So, where to first?" No, "How did you sleep?" or "Thanks for letting me use the car," just straight to business. I gave him the address for Riverside Financial and settled in for what I knew would be an uncomfortable drive. The first 20 minutes passed in relative silence. Marcus had his music playing loud enough that conversation was difficult, which was probably intentional. I watched the familiar countryside roll by and thought about how different this drive might have been if I'd raised a son who actually cared about spending time with his father. "So, tell me about this streaming opportunity," I said when he finally turned the music down. "It's complicated. Basically, they think I've got the personality for gaming content, big audience potential." "What kind of money are we talking about?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Well, nothing at first, but once I build up subscribers, it could be huge. Some of these guys make millions." Some other guys, not Marcus, who'd never demonstrated the discipline or work ethic required for any kind of success, but some mythical other people who'd figured out how to make money playing video games. "And what do they want from you in terms of commitment?" "I'd need to stream like 6 hours a day, minimum, build up content, engage with viewers, that sort of thing." 6 hours a day playing video games. It sounded suspiciously like what Marcus already did, except now he was calling it a business opportunity. "Have you thought about what happens if this doesn't work out? Maybe having a backup plan?" The look he gave me could have frozen fire. "Dad, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You never believe in anything I try to do. Maybe if you supported me once in a while instead of always being negative." Here we were again. Every conversation about Marcus's future somehow became about my failures as a father. The fact that I'd supported him financially for 8 years while he bounced from one unrealistic scheme to another apparently counted for nothing. "I'm not being negative, son. I just think it might be wise to have some income coming in while you're building this streaming career." "Income like what? You want me to flip burgers while I'm trying to build something real?" Something real, as opposed to the insurance business that had paid for his college education, his car, his apartment, and every meal he'd eaten for the past decade. That was apparently fake work compared to the very real business of playing video games online. We pulled into the parking lot of Riverside Financial 15 minutes later. I gathered my papers and checked my watch. The meeting was scheduled for 9, and it was 8:55. "This should take about an hour," I told Marcus. "You can wait here or grab some coffee down the street." "An hour? I thought you said this would be quick." "I said I needed to be here by 9. Financial planning takes time." Marcus drummed his fingers on the steering wheel. "Dad, I really need to get on the road. Can't you reschedule this?" "No, I can't reschedule it. This is important business that affects both of our futures." "Both of our futures? How does your boring finance stuff affect me?" I almost laughed. How did my financial planning affect the man who lived entirely off my income? The question was so absurd that I couldn't find words to answer it. "I'll be out as soon as I can," I said, getting out of the car. The meeting with Janet Morrison, my accountant, went longer than expected. We were reviewing the details of my estate planning, specifically the trust fund I'd established for Marcus. $2 million, carefully invested and managed, designed to provide him with financial security for the rest of his life. The income alone would be enough to support a modest lifestyle, assuming he ever learned to manage money responsibly. "Have you discussed this with Marcus?" Janet asked as we reviewed the documentation. "Not in detail. I want it to be a surprise." "At his age, it might be helpful for him to understand what's coming. Financial literacy, planning for the future, that sort of thing." I thought about Marcus sitting in the parking lot, probably texting his gaming friends about how his father was ruining his life by making him wait an extra 30 minutes. Marcus has never shown much interest in financial responsibility. Well, $2 million has a way of focusing people's attention. You might be surprised. The meeting wrapped up at 10:15. I signed the final documents, updated my beneficiary information, and walked back to the parking lot expecting to find Marcus waiting patiently, maybe even reading a book or listening to a podcast. Instead, I found him on his phone, clearly agitated. "Finally," he said as I got back in the car. "Do you have any idea what time it is?" "I'm sorry it ran long. Financial planning is complex." "Dad, I was supposed to be on the road 30 minutes ago. This interview is really important." We pulled out of the parking lot and headed toward the bank, my second stop of the morning. Marcus's mood was deteriorating rapidly, and I could feel the tension building in the small space of the rental car. "How much longer is this going to take?" he asked as we sat at a red light. "Maybe another hour at the bank, then we're done." "Another hour? Dad, this is insane. Why didn't you tell me this would take all morning?" "Because I didn't expect my accountant to need extra time to finalize my estate planning." "Estate planning? What's that supposed to mean?" I looked at my son's profile as he stared ahead at the traffic light, his jaw clenched with frustration. Here was an opportunity to tell him about the trust fund, about the financial security I'd worked decades to provide for him. But something in his attitude stopped me. The entitlement, the complete lack of consideration for my needs, the assumption that his gaming interview was more important than my life's work. "It means planning for the future, Marcus, something you might want to think about." The light turned green and we drove in silence toward Riverside National Bank. I could feel Marcus's resentment radiating from the driver's seat, and I found myself wondering when my relationship with my son had become so poisonous. When had helping him become such a burden to him? The bank appointment took exactly 57 minutes. I needed to provide additional documentation for the mortgage refinancing, sign some paperwork, and meet with the loan officer to discuss terms. Standard business that Marcus could have easily waded through if he'd cared about anything other than his own schedule. When I came back to the car at 11:45, Marcus exploded. "This is unbelievable, Dad. You've completely screwed up my entire day." "I'm sorry the appointments took longer than expected." "Sorry doesn't fix anything. I'm supposed to be in Portland by 2 o'clock. It's almost noon and I'm still an hour from home." "Can't you call them and explain you'll be a few minutes late?" Marcus stared at me like I'd suggested he set himself on fire. "A few minutes late? Dad, I'm going to be at least 2 hours late, assuming I can even find this place. This interview was my one shot, and you've completely ruined it." The unfairness of his accusation hit me like a physical blow. I'd given him the car for his trip. I'd asked for 2 hours of his time in exchange. The appointments had run long, but not unreasonably so. Yet somehow this was all my fault. Marcus, I understand you're disappointed, but I had important business to handle. Important business? More important than your son's future? His future, built on the foundation of video games and streaming income that might never materialize, compared to the very real business of managing the money that would eventually make him financially independent for life. "Let's just head back," I said. "Maybe you can still make the meeting." The drive home was a masterclass in passive-aggressive silence. Marcus drove 10 miles over the speed limit, took every turn a little too hard, and radiated hostility from every pore. I sat in the passenger seat, watching the countryside blur by, and thought about the irony. In my briefcase were documents guaranteeing Marcus $2 million, and he was furious at me for taking too long to sign them. We reached my house at 12:30. Marcus didn't even turn off the engine. "I need to grab some stuff from my apartment and get on the road," he said. "I'll drop you off here." "What about getting your things? I thought you might want lunch first." "Dad, I don't have time for lunch. Every minute counts now." I gathered my briefcase and papers, then paused before getting out. "Marcus, I know today didn't go as planned, but I appreciate you helping me out." "Yeah, whatever. Next time, maybe warn me when you're going to waste my entire morning." I stood in my driveway and watched him drive away, tires squealing slightly as he took the corner toward his apartment complex. No goodbye, no acknowledgement that I'd given him free use of a rental car for his trip, no recognition that perhaps his father's business matters might actually be important. The house felt quiet as I settled into my home office to review the estate documents Janet had prepared. Everything was in order. The trust fund was established, properly funded, and designed to provide Marcus with financial security for decades to come. All he had to do was wait for me to die, and he'd never have to worry about money again. I found myself wondering if that knowledge would change anything about his attitude toward me. Would he be more patient, more considerate, more willing to occasionally help his father if he knew what was waiting for him? Or would it just make him more resentful of having to pretend to care? My phone buzzed with a text message around 2:30. "Marcus, checking in from the road. Running super late thanks to this morning. Interview probably blown. Thanks a lot." I stared at the message for a long time before deleting it without responding. Outside my office window, the afternoon sun was shining on the garden I'd spent decades cultivating, the yard I'd maintained, the home I'd worked so hard to afford. Inside, I was surrounded by the financial documents that represented a lifetime of careful planning and responsible management. And somehow, according to my son, I was the problem. That evening, I called my sister Elena in Phoenix to tell her about the day's events. Elena had never married or had children, but she'd watched me struggle with Marcus for years and had strong opinions about my parenting choices. "You're enabling him, Robert," she said after I'd finished the story. "He's 26 years old and you're still making excuses for his behavior." "I'm not making excuses. I just think he's going through a rough patch." "A rough patch? Robert, he's been going through a rough patch since college graduation. At what point do you admit that this is just who he is?" Elena had a point, but she'd never had children. It was easy to be objective about someone else's kid. "He's my son, Elena. I can't just give up on him." "I'm not saying give up on him. I'm saying stop letting him treat you like his personal ATM and chauffeur service. When was the last time he did something nice for you?" I thought about it for a while. When was the last time Marcus had called just to check on me, or offered to help with something without being asked, or shown any genuine interest in my life and well-being? "He's busy building his career," I said finally. "Robert, playing video games is not building a career, it's avoiding adulthood. And you're helping him avoid it by paying for everything." After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee and thought about Elena's words. Was I enabling Marcus's immaturity by continuing to support him financially? Was my desire to be a generous father actually preventing him from becoming a responsible adult? The trust fund documents were still spread across my dining room table. $2 million waiting for him. Money that would set him free from any need to develop work ethic or financial discipline. Maybe Elena was right. Maybe I was part of the problem. But he was still my son, and despite everything, I still loved him. The next morning brought another crisis. Marcus called at 7:30, waking me from the first decent sleep I'd had in days. "Dad, I need help. The interview was a disaster yesterday, and now my rent is due and I'm short." "What happened at the interview?" "I got there 2 hours late because of yesterday morning, and they'd already given the spot to someone else. The whole trip was a waste." I felt a stab of guilt. "I'm sorry the appointments ran long." "Yeah, well, sorry doesn't pay my rent. I need $800 by tomorrow or I'm getting evicted." $800. A week's worth of work for most people, but for Marcus it was just another emergency that required Dad's checkbook. I thought about the trust fund, about the security it would provide, about how much easier life would be for him once he inherited it. "Marcus, maybe this is a good time to think about getting a regular job while you pursue these other opportunities." The silence on the other end was deafening. "Are you seriously lecturing me about jobs right now? I just need $800. "I understand that, but maybe it's time to consider some steady income so these rent emergencies don't keep happening." "Dad, I've explained this before. I'm building something here. These streaming channels take time to develop. I can't be distracted by some minimum wage job." Distracted by work? The concept that employment might interfere with his gaming career. I looked at the trust fund documents still sitting on my table and wondered if I was crazy to leave this much money to someone who thought working for a living was beneath him. "I'll transfer the money today," I said. "But Marcus, this can't keep happening. You need to find some way to support yourself." "Thanks, Dad. I really appreciate it. And don't worry, once this streaming thing takes off, I'll pay you back for everything." He'd been saying that for 8 years. The cryptocurrency venture was going to pay me back. The dropshipping business was going to pay me back. The social media influencer plan was going to pay me back. None of them ever did. After transferring the rent money, I called Janet Morrison to schedule another meeting. It was time to think seriously about the structure of Marcus's inheritance. Maybe Elena was right. Maybe I needed to attach some conditions to the trust fund. Requirements for employment, limits on withdrawals, incentives for responsible behavior. But first, I had a more immediate problem. My car was still at the dealership, and I needed to decide whether to pay for expensive repairs or start shopping for a replacement. At 71, major purchases felt different than they had when I was younger. Every decision now had to consider how much time I had left and what kind of legacy I wanted to leave. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was worried about leaving the right legacy for a son who couldn't be bothered to drive me to a meeting. That afternoon, I took an Uber to the Ford dealership to check on my car. The diagnosis was worse than expected. Not just transmission problems, but engine issues and brake work. The total repair bill would be over $7,000 on a car that might last another year or two. "At this point, Mr. Castellano, you're probably better off looking at something newer," the service manager said diplomatically. I walked around the used car lot, looking at prices and mileage numbers, feeling older than my 71 years. Car shopping had always been something I'd done with confidence, researching options and negotiating deals. Now it just felt overwhelming. That's when I thought about asking Marcus to help. Not for money, but for his time and perspective. He was good with technology, understood things like backup cameras and navigation systems that baffled me. Maybe car shopping could be something we did together, a chance to rebuild some connection between us. I called him from the dealership. "Marcus, I need to buy a car. Would you mind coming with me to look at some options?" "When?" "This afternoon, if you're free." "Dad, I can't today. I'm in the middle of setting up my streaming equipment. The new microphone arrived and I need to get everything configured." The new microphone, purchased with the $800 I'd sent him that morning, money that was supposed to be for rent. I felt my patience beginning to fray. "Marcus, this won't take long, and I'd really value your input on the technology features. Can't we do it this weekend? I'm really busy with this setup. I need a car now. Mine's not repairable." "Dad, just buy something reliable. You don't need me there for that. Just buy something reliable."
as if choosing the right car was a simple matter of picking any vehicle off the lot, as if his father's concerns weren't worth a few hours of his time. "Never mind," I said. "I'll figure it out. Thanks for understanding. This streaming setup is really complicated." I hung up and walked back into the dealership, feeling more alone than I had in years. The salesman, a young guy named Tommy who reminded me of Marcus, was enthusiastic and helpful.
He showed me several options, explained the features patiently, and didn't make me feel stupid for asking basic questions about modern car technology. 3 hours later, I drove off the lot in a certified pre-owned Honda Civic, silver with low mileage and all the safety features I'd wanted. It was a good car, a smart purchase, and I'd handled the entire transaction myself. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this should have been something I shared with my son. That evening, I sent Marcus a text with a photo of the new car. "Bought a Honda today. Thought you might like to see it." His response came an hour later. "Looks nice. How much did it cost?" Not "congratulations" or "glad you found something good," just curiosity about money, probably calculating how my car purchase might affect his own financial prospects. I didn't answer the question. The weekend passed quietly. I spent Saturday getting familiar with the Honda's features, reading the owner's manual, and organizing the paperwork. Sunday morning, I drove to church for the first time in months, enjoying the smooth ride and the reliability of having dependable transportation again. After the service, I ran into Paul Martinez, an old friend whose son David had graduated high school the same year as Marcus. Paul and I had coached Little League together, attended the same graduation ceremony, shared the pride and worry that came with raising boys. "How's Marcus doing?" Paul asked as we walked to the parking lot. "He's fine, still trying to figure out his career path." Paul nodded knowingly. "David just got promoted to assistant manager at the bank, bought his first house last month." I smiled and offered congratulations, but inside I felt a familiar ache. David Martinez was 26 years old, the same age as Marcus. He had a career, a promotion, a house. He was building a life, taking responsibility, moving forward like a normal adult. Marcus was setting up streaming equipment with his rent money. "You should be proud," I told Paul. "That's really wonderful." "Thanks, Robert. These kids grow up fast, don't they? Seems like yesterday they were playing catch in our backyards." I thought about those backyard games, about the hours I'd spent teaching Marcus to throw and catch, about the dreams I'd had for his future. Little League practices, school events, bedtime stories, all the ordinary moments of raising a child. Had I somehow failed him during those years? Was there something I should have done differently that would have produced a David Martinez instead of the man who couldn't spare 3 hours to help his father buy a car? That evening, I called Marcus to check in. The conversation was brief and unsatisfying. He was excited about his streaming setup, optimistic about building an audience, convinced that success was just around the corner. Again. "How's the new car?" he asked toward the end of the call. "It's good. I like it." "Must have been expensive." "It was a reasonable price for what I needed." "That's good. I know you've been spending a lot of money lately with the rental car and everything." Spending a lot of money. The implication was clear. I'd been frivolous with my finances, and perhaps I should be more careful about my expenses. This from the man whose rent I'd paid 3 days earlier. "Marcus, I need to be able to get around. Transportation isn't optional." "I know, Dad. I'm just saying, if money's tight, maybe I could help out somehow." Help out. The 26-year-old with no income wanted to help his working father manage money. The irony was so thick I could taste it. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm fine." "Okay, well, let me know if anything changes. I'm here for you." After we hung up, I sat in my new car in the garage and thought about that last comment. "I'm here for you." Where exactly was here? When I'd needed help with transportation, he'd been too busy. When I'd wanted company car shopping, he'd been setting up gaming equipment. When was he actually here for anything that mattered to me? I pulled out my phone and looked at the contact information for Janet Morrison. Tomorrow, I was going to call her about modifying the trust fund.
If Marcus wanted to inherit $2 million, maybe he needed to demonstrate that he could handle responsibility first. The trust fund could wait. Maybe it should wait. Monday morning brought rain and another crisis call from Marcus. I was getting ready for work when my phone rang at 7:15. "Dad, I need a huge favor. My car won't start and I have this really important meeting downtown at 9. "What kind of meeting?" "It's with this guy who might want to sponsor my stream. Could be really big money." Another meeting that could change everything. "Did you call a mechanic?" "Dad, I don't have money for a mechanic right now. I just need a ride downtown. It would really help me out." I looked at the rain pelting my kitchen window and thought about my own schedule. Monday mornings were always busy at the office, with client calls starting at 8:30 and appointments running until noon. "Marcus, I have a full morning of work. Can't you take an Uber?" An Uber would cost like $30 each way. I'm trying to be smart about money. Smart about money? The man who'd spent his rent payment on streaming equipment was worried about $60 in transportation costs. "What time is your meeting?" 9 o'clock, downtown Portland. Portland was 45 minutes each way in good traffic. With the rain and Monday morning rush hour, it would be at least an hour each direction. 2 hours minimum out of my workday for another one of Marcus's long-shot business opportunities. "I'll pick you up at 7:45, I said, "but I need to be back by 10 for client calls." "You're the best, Dad. This could really be the break I've been waiting for." I rescheduled my morning appointments, called my assistant to explain the delay, and drove through the rain to Marcus's apartment complex. He was waiting under the covered walkway, dressed in what he probably thought was business attire: clean jeans, a button-down shirt, and sneakers. "Thanks for doing this," he said as he got in the car. "I really appreciate it." The drive into Portland was slow and tense. Marcus spent most of the time on his phone, texting with his potential sponsor and researching the company. I focused on the traffic and tried not to think about the client calls I was missing. "So, tell me about this sponsor opportunity," I said when he finally put the phone down. "It's this energy drink company. They're looking for new streamers to represent their brand. If I get this deal, they'll pay me to mention their product during my streams." "How much money are we talking about?" "Well, it depends on my viewership numbers, but potentially it could be like $500 a month. $500 a month for mentioning energy drinks while playing video games. I was missing important client meetings so Marcus could pursue the possibility of earning $500 a month. "What about your viewership numbers? How many people are watching your streams?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "I'm still building my audience, but this sponsor says they're looking for people with potential, not just current numbers." "How many viewers do you have now?" "It varies. Sometimes 12, sometimes 20. Last week I had 37 for like an hour." 37 viewers. Marcus was missing work and disrupting my schedule to meet with an energy drink company about the possibility of earning money from 37 people watching him play video games. We reached downtown Portland at 8:50, found a parking spot, and walked 3 blocks through the rain to a glass office building.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Marcus checked the directory and found his meeting on the 14th floor. "This should take about an hour," he said as we waited for the elevator. "You can wait in the lobby or grab coffee or whatever. I'll wait here. Try to keep it closer to 30 minutes if you can." The lobby was comfortable enough, with leather chairs and business magazines. I settled in with my phone to handle some work emails and tried not to think about the clients who were probably wondering where I was. Marcus came back down after 90 minutes, looking deflated. "How did it go?" I asked. "Not great. They want people with at least 1,000 regular viewers before they'll consider sponsorship." 1,000 viewers? Marcus had 37 on his best day, and he dragged me through rush hour traffic in the rain to learn that he wasn't even close to qualifying for a $500 monthly sponsorship. The drive home was quiet. Marcus stared out the passenger window while I navigated the traffic and tried to calculate how much this morning had cost me in lost business. 2 rescheduled client calls, 1 missed appointment, and probably 3 hours total when you factored in the driving time. "I'm sorry it didn't work out," I said as we pulled into his apartment complex. Yeah, well, it's all about building the audience first. Once I get more viewers, opportunities like this will be easier. Once he got more viewers, Marcus had been streaming for 8 months and had never broken 50 viewers for a single session. His subscriber count was stuck in double digits, but he remained convinced that success was inevitable if he just kept playing games long enough. Maybe it's time to think about some supplemental income while you're building the streaming business, I suggested. The look he gave me was pure annoyance. Dad, I've told you before, I need to focus on this if I want it to succeed. Getting distracted by some random job will just slow down my progress. Distracted by employment? The 26-year-old who couldn't support himself was worried about job distractions interfering with his video game career. I understand that, Marcus, but maybe something part-time just to cover basic expenses. Look, I know you don't get it, but this is a real business. It takes time to build something worthwhile. Not everything is about immediate profit. Not everything is about immediate profit. This from the man who called me for rent money every month and had just wasted my entire morning chasing a $500 sponsorship deal he wasn't qualified for. I'll talk to you later, I said as he got out of the car. Thanks again for the ride. I know it was a hassle, but these opportunities are important. I drove home through the rain, thinking about opportunity costs and wasted time and the difference between supporting your child and enabling their delusions. By the time I reached my house, I'd made a decision. It was time to have a serious conversation with Janet Morrison about the trust fund. The meeting with Janet Morrison the following Tuesday changed everything. I sat across from her mahogany desk, the trust fund documents spread between us like evidence in a trial I was both prosecuting and defending. "You want to add performance conditions to the inheritance?" Janet asked, her pen poised over a legal pad. "I want Marcus to prove he can handle responsibility before he gets access to $2 million. Janet nodded thoughtfully. She'd been managing my financial affairs for 15 years and had watched Marcus's progression from college graduate to professional disappointment with the same concerned detachment I'd tried to maintain. "What kind of conditions are you thinking about?" I'd spent the weekend researching incentive trusts, talking to Elena, and thinking about David Martinez's promotion and new house. Employment requirements. He needs to hold a steady job for at least 2 years before he can access the principal. Maybe community service requirements too. And if he doesn't meet the conditions, then the money goes to charity. St. Vincent's Hospital has a good financial literacy program for young adults. Seems appropriate. Janet made notes as we talked. The trust could be restructured to release funds gradually, tied to Marcus's demonstrated ability to support himself. Employment verification, annual reviews, consequences for irresponsible behavior. It was like designing a training program for a 30-year-old child. This is going to be a significant change, Robert. Have you considered discussing it with Marcus first? What would be the point? He'd just see it as another way I'm trying to control his life. Or he might see it as motivation to finally grow up. I thought about that as I drove home. Would knowing about the trust fund motivate Marcus to change, or would it just make him resentful? Would employment requirements inspire him to find work, or would he spend 2 years in the most minimal job he could find, counting days until he could access the money? My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. Marcus, right on schedule with another crisis. "Dad, I need to ask you something, and please don't lecture me about it." "What's going on?" "My car really is dead, like completely dead. The mechanic says it needs a new engine." I sat in my garage, engine running, dreading what was coming next. How much? $4,000. But here's the thing, I found this great used car for $6,000 that would be way more reliable. $6,000. For a man with no income, no savings, and no understanding of how money worked. Marcus, that's a lot of money. I know, but think about it as an investment. If I have reliable transportation, I can pursue more opportunities. Maybe even get a part-time job to help with expenses. Maybe even get a part-time job. The possibility of employment was now being presented as a favor he might do for me in exchange for buying him a car. What kind of opportunities?
Well, there's this gaming tournament in Seattle next month. First prize is $10,000, plus exposure to sponsors and streaming networks. A gaming tournament. Marcus wanted me to buy him a $6,000 car so he could drive to Seattle and play video games for money. What are the odds of winning? It's not just about winning, Dad. It's about networking, building connections, getting my name out there. Getting his name out there. To the same community of unemployed gamers who thought playing video games was a legitimate career path. Marcus, I'll think about it. But if I help you with a car, we need to have a serious conversation about your future. What do you mean? I mean it's time to think about steady employment, financial responsibility, planning for the long term. The pause was telling. Dad, we've been over this. I'm building something here. These streaming careers don't happen overnight. How long have you been streaming? 8 months. And how much money have you made? Another pause. It's not about the money yet. It's about building the foundation. The foundation. Built on 37 viewers and energy drink companies that wouldn't return his calls. Let me think about the car situation, I said. We'll talk more this weekend. Thanks, Dad. I really appreciate you considering it. After we hung up, I sat in my garage and thought about the conversation with Janet. Performance conditions suddenly seemed less like controlling manipulation and more like basic common sense. If Marcus wanted access to his inheritance, maybe he should demonstrate that he could handle responsibility first. That evening, I called Elena to tell her about the trust fund modifications. It's about time, she said. Though I'm surprised you're being so generous with the employment requirement. 2 years seems pretty short. What would you suggest? 5 years minimum. And not just any job, something with potential for advancement. You don't want him spending 5 years flipping burgers just to unlock his inheritance.
Alina had a point, but 5 years felt extreme. He's 26 years old. If he can't figure out basic employment in 2 years, maybe he doesn't deserve the money. Robert, you're thinking like a father. Think like a businessman. Would you give $2 million to someone with Marcus's track record? The question was brutal but fair. If Marcus were anyone else's son, would I trust him with a substantial inheritance? Would I believe he had the judgment and maturity to manage that kind of money responsibly? Probably not, I admitted. Then maybe the employment requirement isn't enough. Maybe he needs to prove he can manage money, maintain relationships, contribute to his community. Adult stuff. After talking to Alina, I called Janet and scheduled another meeting to discuss more comprehensive performance requirements. If Marcus wanted his inheritance, he could earn it by demonstrating that he'd become the kind of person who deserved it. But first, I had to decide about the car. Wednesday morning brought an unexpected visit. I was having coffee and reading the newspaper when my doorbell rang at 8:30. Through the peephole, I could see Marcus standing on my front porch, looking unusually serious. "This is a surprise," I said, opening the door. "What brings you by so early?" "I wanted to talk to you about the car thing. Can I come in?" We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd eaten countless meals alone while Marcus lived his consequence-free lifestyle 3 miles away. He looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with his phone and avoiding eye contact. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday," he began, "about steady employment and responsibility. And maybe you're right. Maybe I should get some kind of part-time job while I'm building the streaming business." This was new. In 8 months of supporting his gaming career, Marcus had never voluntarily suggested getting a job. "What changed your mind?" "Well, I was talking to this guy online, another streamer, and he said most successful content creators work regular jobs for the first few years. It takes time to build an audience." Advice from another gamer had accomplished what months of parental suggestions couldn't. I tried not to feel insulted by the irony. "What kind of job are you thinking about?" "Maybe something in retail or food service. Something flexible that would let me stream in the evenings." Something flexible. Code for the easiest possible job that wouldn't interfere with his real priorities. "That sounds like a good start," I said carefully. "When would you begin looking?" "Well, that's the thing. I'd need a car first. It's hard to job hunt when you can't get around reliably." There it was. The transportation crisis was now being reframed as a barrier to employment, which was being offered as a concession to my concerns about responsibility. Marcus was playing three-dimensional chess with my parental guilt. I see. So I was thinking, if you could help me with the car situation, I could start looking for work right away, maybe even this week. Maybe even this week. The 26-year-old was generously offering to start job hunting immediately if I bought him a $6,000 vehicle. Marcus, employment is something you should pursue regardless of transportation issues. People take buses, ride bikes, use rideshare services. Not having a car isn't really an excuse for unemployment. His expression shifted slightly, the practiced sincerity replaced by familiar irritation. Dad, have you tried taking the bus in this city? It takes 2 hours to get anywhere. I've taken the bus. It's not convenient, but it's possible. Look, I'm trying to be responsible here. I'm willing to get a job, but I need reliable transportation to make it work. Willing to get a job. Like employment was a personal favor he was considering doing for me. What if we try something different? I said. What if you find a job first, work for a month to show you're serious, and then we'll discuss transportation? The suggestion clearly caught him off guard. A month? Dad, I can't job hunt without a car, and even if I found something, how would I get there every day? The same way millions of people without cars get to work. Public transportation, carpooling, asking friends for rides. That's not realistic for someone trying to build a career. A career? In retail or food service, according to his own description 5 minutes earlier? Marcus, let me ask you something. If you inherited a substantial amount of money someday, what would you do with it? The question seemed to confuse him. I don't know. Why? Just curious. Would you invest it? Start a business? Buy property? I guess I'd probably pay off any debts, maybe buy a nice house, travel a little. Why are you asking about inheritance stuff? Pay off debts, buy a house, travel. No mention of education, investment, or using wealth to create more opportunity. Just consumption. I'm thinking about estate planning, making sure my money goes to people who will use it wisely. Well, obviously I'd be responsible with it. I'm your son. Obviously. Because genetic relationship automatically conferred financial wisdom. I hope so. But responsibility is something you demonstrate through actions, not just words. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Is this about the car? Because I'm really trying to be mature about this whole situation. It's about more than the car. It's about you showing me that you can handle adult responsibilities before I invest more money in your lifestyle. Invest more money in my lifestyle? Dad, I'm asking for help buying basic transportation so I can get a job. That's the opposite of lifestyle spending. The conversation was going in circles. Marcus wanted a car so he could get a job, so he could prove he was responsible, so he could deserve help with a car. The logic was perfectly circular and completely wrong. Tell you what, I said. Show me 3 job applications this week. Real applications with follow-up calls and references. Demonstrate that you're serious about employment and we'll revisit the transportation issue. 3 applications? In 1 week? Without a car? Marcus, there are businesses within walking distance of your apartment. There's a grocery store, 2 restaurants, and a coffee shop, all within 6 blocks of where you live. You want me to work at a grocery store? The disdain in his voice was unmistakable. Grocery store work was apparently beneath someone who spent 12 hours a day playing video games for an audience of 37 people. I want you to work somewhere, anywhere. I want you to prove that you understand the connection between effort and reward. He stood up from the table, clearly frustrated. I can't believe you're making this so complicated. I'm trying to be responsible, and you're putting all these obstacles in my way. Employment isn't an obstacle, Marcus. It's a basic requirement of adult life. Fine, I'll get your stupid job applications, but this is really unfair. What's unfair is expecting your father to support you indefinitely while you chase fantasies. The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but they were true. Marcus stared at me for a moment, his face cycling through surprise, hurt, and anger. Fantasies? Dad, people make real money streaming. Just because you don't understand the industry doesn't mean it's not legitimate. People make real money doing lots of things, Marcus. Very few people make money playing video games. Even fewer make enough money to support themselves. You know what? Forget the car. I'll figure something else out. He headed for the door, then turned back. And when my streaming career takes off and I'm making more money than your insurance business ever did, maybe you'll understand that not everyone has to follow your boring traditional path to success. The door slammed behind him with enough force to rattle the windows. I sat at my kitchen table and thought about boring traditional paths to success. Paths that involve showing up to work every day, serving clients, building relationships, managing money responsibly. Paths that had provided Marcus with 26 years of food, shelter, education, and opportunities he'd never had to earn. Maybe Elena was right. Maybe 5 years of employment requirements wasn't too much to ask. Thursday afternoon brought another perspective on my situation. I was at Riverside Financial, reviewing my quarterly investment statements with Janet, when she mentioned that her own son had recently started his first job after college. "Kevin's working at a marketing firm downtown," she said as we reviewed my portfolio performance. "Entry-level position, but he's excited about learning the business." "That's wonderful. How's he adjusting to the working world?" "He loves it, says it feels good to finally be contributing something instead of just taking from us all the time." Contributing instead of taking. The phrase stuck with me as I drove home. When was the last time Marcus had contributed anything to our relationship besides problems that required my money to solve? That evening, I decided to test Marcus's commitment to job hunting. I drove to his apartment complex and knocked on his door. "Dad, what are you doing here?" I wanted to see how the job applications were going. Marcus stepped aside to let me in. His apartment was exactly what I'd expected. Expensive gaming equipment dominating the living room, empty energy drink cans scattered across multiple surfaces, clothes piled on furniture instead of put away properly. The smell of old pizza and unwashed dishes permeated everything. "So, how many applications have you completed?" "Well, I've been researching options. There are actually more possibilities than I thought." Researching options. Translation, he hadn't applied anywhere. "Can you show me what you found?" Marcus led me to his computer setup, a elaborate arrangement of multiple monitors, professional microphones, and lighting equipment that had cost more than most people's cars. He pulled up a web browser with several job search websites bookmarked. "See, there are tons of opportunities. I've been looking at retail positions, restaurant work, even some office jobs." Looking at job listings wasn't the same as applying for jobs, but Marcus seemed to think browsing websites counted as effort. "Have you actually submitted any applications?" "I'm still deciding which ones are the best fit. You don't want to just apply everywhere randomly." "Why not? What's wrong with applying broadly and seeing what responds?" "Because you want to be strategic about it. Show genuine interest in companies that align with your values." Values? Marcus was worried about value alignment with potential employers at Subway and Target? What values are we talking about? "Well, workplace culture, growth opportunities, scheduling flexibility." Scheduling flexibility. So he could continue streaming 12 hours a day while working the absolute minimum required to appease his father. "Marcus, most entry-level jobs don't offer much flexibility. The point is to prove you can show up consistently and handle responsibility." "I understand that, Dad, but I also want to find something sustainable long-term." Long-term? The man who changed career aspirations 6 times in 2 years was worried about long-term sustainability? I walked around his apartment while he explained his job search strategy. In the bedroom, I found stacks of unopened mail, bills that clearly hadn't been paid, and clothes that appeared to have been worn and discarded without ever seeing a washing machine. "Marcus, when was the last time you cleaned this place?" "I've been busy with research and applications. Cleaning isn't really a priority right now." "Not a priority." Living in filth was acceptable as long as he was researching job opportunities he had no intention of pursuing. "How about this?" I said, returning to the living room. I'll give you until Saturday to submit 3 actual job applications, real applications, with completed forms and submitted documents. If you can do that, we'll go car shopping on Sunday. Saturday, that's only 2 days. Marcus, filling out job applications doesn't take weeks of research. You find openings, submit your information, and follow up. It's not complicated. But I want to make sure I'm applying to the right places. There are no wrong places when you're unemployed and living off your father's money. The comment stung as I'd intended it to. Marcus's expression hardened, but he nodded agreement. Fine, 3 applications by Saturday. But I want to pick the car together, not just have you choose something. Deal. But real applications, Marcus, with confirmation emails or receipts that prove you actually submitted them. I drove home thinking about confirmation emails and proof of effort and the fact that I was negotiating with my adult son like he was a reluctant teenager. The trust fund modifications suddenly seemed less like financial planning and more like self-preservation. Friday morning, I called Janet to schedule another meeting about the inheritance structure. I want to add more conditions, I told her. Employment history, but also education requirements, community service, maybe even financial literacy courses. Robert, you're designing a pretty elaborate obstacle course. I'm designing a character-building program. If Marcus wants to inherit substantial money, he should prove he's become the kind of person who can handle it responsibly. What if he never meets the requirements? Then the money goes to people who will use it to help others, instead of funding a 26-year-old's Peter Pan syndrome. Janet was quiet for a moment. You know, there's another option. You could reduce the inheritance amount and use stricter requirements for the remainder. Give him enough to provide basic security, but not enough to eliminate his need to work. The suggestion was intriguing. A smaller inheritance that provided a safety net instead of a lottery ticket. Enough money to supplement income from actual employment, not enough to replace the need for employment. How much were you thinking? Maybe $200,000 instead of $2 million. Enough to help with a house down payment or emergency expenses, but not enough to fund a lifetime of irresponsibility. $200,000, a substantial gift by any standard, but not life-changing money for someone who refused to build a life worth changing. And the remaining $1,800,000? Charity, medical research, education programs, organizations that help people develop job skills. Turn Marcus's inheritance into something that actually contributes to society. The idea was appealing in ways I hadn't expected. Instead of rewarding my son's immaturity with generational wealth, I could use that money to help people who were actually trying to improve their circumstances. Let me think about it over the weekend, I said, after I see whether Marcus can manage to submit 3 job applications in 4 days. Saturday evening brought a surprise. Marcus called at 6 o'clock, sounding genuinely excited. Dad, I did it. 3 applications, all submitted. Where did you apply? GameStop at the mall, the Best Buy near my apartment, and this local computer repair shop downtown. All technology-related jobs, of course. Marcus had found a way to pursue employment that still revolved around his primary interests. When do you hear back? They said it could take a week or 2. But I also called each place to follow up, just like you suggested. Follow-up calls. Marcus was demonstrating more initiative than I'd seen from him in years. That's really good, son. I'm proud of you for following through. Thanks. So, are we still on for car shopping tomorrow? Absolutely. I'll pick you up at 10. Sunday morning found me at Marcus's apartment complex right on time. He was waiting outside, dressed in clean clothes and looking more energetic than I'd seen him in months. Maybe the prospect of employment was already having a positive effect. Where do you want to start? I asked as we drove toward the commercial district. I was thinking we could look at that Honda dealership first. They have some good certified pre-owned options. We spent 3 hours looking at cars. Marcus was surprisingly practical in his choices, focusing on reliability and fuel efficiency rather than expensive features. We test drove several vehicles, compared prices, and discussed financing options like responsible adults. What about this one? Marcus pointed to a 5-year-old Honda Accord with 60,000 miles and a clean maintenance record. That's a good choice. Reliable, affordable, should last for years with proper maintenance. The price was $5,500, well within the budget I'd mentally established. We negotiated with the salesman, arranged financing, and completed the paperwork. Throughout the process, Marcus was engaged, asking intelligent questions and showing genuine appreciation for my help. "Dad, I really can't thank you enough for this," he said as we signed the final documents. "Having reliable transportation is going to make such a difference. I'm glad I could help. And Marcus, I'm proud of you for taking the job search seriously." Driving home in our separate cars, I felt cautiously optimistic about Marcus's future for the first time in years. Maybe he was finally ready to grow up. Maybe the combination of employment requirements and practical support would help him transition into responsible adulthood. That optimism lasted exactly 4 days. Wednesday afternoon, I got a call from Marcus that shattered my hopes for his newfound maturity. "Dad, I need to ask you something, and please don't get upset." "What's going on?" "I got a call back from GameStop. They want to interview me tomorrow." "That's wonderful news. Congratulations." "Yeah, well, here's the thing. The interview is at the same time as this really important streaming event. There's this tournament happening online, and if I participate, I could get noticed by some major sponsors." My heart sank. "Marcus, you're not seriously considering skipping a job interview for a video game tournament." "It's not just a video game, Dad. This is a major industry event. The exposure could be worth thousands of dollars in future sponsorship deals." "Could be worth thousands, or could be worth nothing, just like every other tournament and sponsorship opportunity you've chased. This is different. I've been building relationships with people in the community, and they think I have real potential." Real potential, based on 37 viewers and 0 income after 8 months of trying. "Marcus, reschedule the interview. GameStop will understand if you explain the situation." "I already asked. They said tomorrow is the only day they're doing interviews this week." "Then skip the tournament. There will be other tournaments." "Dad, you don't understand. This particular event only happens once a year. If I miss it, I'll have to wait until next year for another chance." The conversation was surreal. My son was seriously considering abandoning a real job opportunity to play video games online for an audience that wouldn't fill a small classroom. "Marcus, let me ask you something. How much money have you made streaming in the past 8 months?" "It's not about the money yet. It's about building the foundation for future earnings." "How much money?" A long pause. "About $60 total. But that's just from donations. The real money comes from sponsorships and partnerships." $60 in 8 months. And he was considering skipping a job interview to protect this business model. "Marcus, you've made $60 in 8 months. GameStop probably pays more than that in a single day." "But GameStop is just a retail job. Streaming could be a real career if I can break through to the next level." The next level, where 37 viewers became 1,000, where $60 in 8 months became a living wage, where playing video games transformed into a sustainable business model. What if you don't break through? What if this tournament doesn't lead to sponsorships? What if you're still making $60 8 months from now? That's not going to happen. I can feel that I'm close to something big. He could feel it. Marcus was making life decisions based on feelings about his video game career prospects. "Son, I'm going to say this as clearly as I can. If you skip that job interview tomorrow, don't call me for any more financial help. No rent money, no car payments, no emergency assistance, nothing." The silence stretched for almost a minute. When Marcus finally spoke, his voice was tight with anger. "You're really going to hold my future hostage over one interview?" "I'm not holding anything hostage. I'm telling you that your choices have consequences. Adult choices require adult responsibility." This is unbelievable. I finally get a real opportunity to advance my streaming career, and you're threatening to cut me off. Your real opportunity is the GameStop interview. The streaming tournament is a fantasy. You know what, Dad? Maybe I don't need your financial support. Maybe it's time I prove I can make it on my own. Maybe it is. The line went dead. I sat in my office, staring at the phone and thinking about tough love and enabling behavior and the difference between supporting your child and preventing them from growing up. That evening, I called Janet Morrison at home. "I want to finalize the trust fund modifications," I told her, "and I've decided to reduce the inheritance amount significantly." "How significantly?" $50,000, with strict employment and education requirements.
The rest goes to charity. 50,000? Robert, that's a massive change from 2 million. Marcus just told me he's going to skip a job interview to play in a video game tournament. I think 50,000 is generous under the circumstances. Janet was quiet for a moment. You know, there's no requirement to tell him about any inheritance until after you're gone. You could wait and see if he changes on his own. Or I could use the possibility of inheritance as motivation for him to change now. And if he doesn't change, then he'll get exactly what he's earned.
Nothing. Thursday evening, I waited by my phone to hear whether Marcus had chosen the job interview or the tournament. The call came at 8 o'clock. Dad, I wanted to let you know that I went to the GameStop interview. I felt a wave of relief. How did it go? Really well, actually. They offered me the position. Part-time to start, but with the possibility of more hours if I work out. That's fantastic news. I'm proud of you for making the right choice. Thanks. It wasn't easy, especially since I had to miss the tournament, but I figured you were right about proving I can handle responsibility. We talked for another 10 minutes about the job requirements, the schedule, and his plans for balancing work with streaming. Marcus sounded more mature than I'd heard him in years, and I found myself wondering if the employment ultimatum had finally provided the motivation he needed to grow up. Dad, I want to apologize for yesterday. I know you're just trying to help me succeed. I appreciate that, Marcus. I know change isn't easy, but I really believe this job is going to be good for you. Me too. And who knows, maybe working in retail will teach me some business skills I can use for streaming later on. Even while accepting adult responsibility, Marcus was already planning how to leverage it for his gaming career, but at least he was accepting it. That night, I called Janet to put the trust fund modifications on hold. He got the job? She asked. He got the job, and he seems genuinely committed to making it work. That's encouraging. So no changes to the inheritance? Let's wait and see how long he lasts. If he can hold steady employment for 6 months, maybe he's finally learning to be responsible. And if he can't, then we'll proceed with the $50,000 plan. Marcus started work at GameStop the following Monday. For the first few weeks, he called regularly to tell me about his training, his coworkers, and his growing understanding of retail operations. He seemed genuinely engaged with the work, and his attitude toward employment was more positive than I'd expected. 3 weeks into the job, he called with exciting news. Dad, my manager says I'm picking things up really quickly. She's already talking about giving me more responsibility. That's wonderful, son. How do you like the work? It's actually kind of fun. I get to talk to people about games and technology all day, and I'm learning a lot about customer service and business operations. And how's the streaming going? I've had to cut back on hours, obviously, but I'm still maintaining my audience. Actually, some of my viewers think it's cool that I have a real job now. Some of his viewers thought it was cool. Marcus had found a way to make employment part of his online persona. By the second month, Marcus had developed what appeared to be a genuine work ethic. He was punctual, reliable, and enthusiastic about learning new aspects of the business. His manager had increased his hours and given him additional responsibilities. They're training me to handle special orders and customer service issues, he told me during one of our weekly check-in calls. I might even get promoted to shift supervisor if I keep this up. How do you feel about that? Honestly, I kind of like having structure in my day, and the steady paycheck is nice, even if it's not huge money. Structure and steady paychecks. Marcus was discovering the benefits of employment that millions of people took for granted. Are you still streaming? A few hours in the evenings, mostly weekends, but I'm not as obsessed with it as I used to be. Having a real job makes the streaming feel more like a hobby. A hobby. Marcus had finally developed a realistic perspective on his gaming career. By the 3rd month, I was convinced that Marcus had turned a corner. He was working 30 hours a week, had received his first promotion, and was talking about saving money for his own apartment. Our conversations were more positive, more mature, and more focused on realistic planning than fantasy scenarios. That's when everything fell apart. The call came on a Tuesday evening in October. I was reading in my living room when my phone rang with Marcus's number. Dad, I quit my job today. The words hit me like a physical blow. What happened? I got an offer to join this gaming house in California. It's like a shared living situation where serious streamers work together to build their audiences. A gaming house. Marcus had abandoned steady employment to move into a house full of unemployed gamers in California. Marcus, tell me you're joking. Dad, this is a real opportunity. These guys have connections with major sponsors, professional gaming teams, the whole industry infrastructure. How much are they paying you? Well, it's not about immediate payment. It's about building the foundation for a serious streaming career. No payment. Marcus had quit his job to move across the country for an unpaid opportunity to live with other unemployed gamers. Where are you going to get money for expenses? That's what I wanted to talk to you about. I need help with moving costs and maybe some support while I get established out there. Support while he got established. Marcus wanted me to fund his relocation to an unemployed gaming commune in California. Absolutely not. Dad, please listen to me. This is exactly the kind of break I've been working toward. These guys have connections I could never make on my own. These guys are probably unemployed losers just like you, Marcus, and now you're all unemployed losers together. That's not fair. You don't even know anything about them. I know they convinced you to quit a real job for a fantasy opportunity. That tells me everything I need to know. The conversation deteriorated from there. Marcus accused me of never supporting his dreams. I accused him of being a professional disappointment who couldn't stick with anything that required actual effort. We both said things that were true and hurtful and probably irreparable. Fine, Marcus said finally. I'll figure this out without your help. But don't come crying to me when I'm successful and you realize how wrong you were. Good luck, son. You're going to need it. The line went dead, and I sat in my living room thinking about 3 months of hope crushed by one monumentally stupid decision. Marcus had proven that he could hold a job, learn new skills, and act like a responsible adult. He'd also proven that the moment something more appealing came along, he'd abandon responsibility without a second thought. That night, I called Janet Morrison. Change the trust fund, I said. $50,000, and only if he can prove he's employed and stable for 5 consecutive years. 5 years? Robert, that's a pretty high bar. It's a pretty high inheritance. And based on today's conversation, Marcus needs to prove he can think long-term before he gets access to long-term money. And if he never meets the requirements, then every penny goes to organizations that help people develop job skills and work ethic. Maybe some other parent's kid will benefit from the money Marcus doesn't deserve. The documents were finalized the following week. Marcus Thompson Castellano would inherit $50,000 if and only if he could demonstrate 5 consecutive years of steady employment, financial responsibility, and law-abiding behavior. If he failed to meet those requirements by age 40, the money would go to vocational training programs for at-risk youth. It felt like the right balance between hope and realism, between family loyalty and personal responsibility. 2 weeks later, Marcus called from California. Dad, this gaming house thing isn't working out. Can you help me get home? What happened? It's complicated. These guys aren't as connected as they claimed, and the living situation is pretty weird. Weird how? Just trust me, it's not what I expected. I made a mistake coming out here. I thought about trust and mistakes and the consequences of poor decision-making. Marcus, what happened to not needing my help? I was angry when I said that. You know I didn't mean it. Actually, I think you did mean it, and I think you were right. Dad, please, I'm stuck out here with no money and no way to get home. You had a job, Marcus. You had income, responsibility, and a future. You threw it all away for a fantasy. I know I made a mistake. Can't you help me fix it? I've been helping you fix mistakes for 8 years. At some point, you need to learn to live with the consequences of your choices. What am I supposed to do? Get a job, earn money, solve your own problems like an adult. The conversation ended with Marcus angry and me feeling simultaneously guilty and relieved. For the first time in years, his crisis wasn't automatically becoming my emergency. 3 days later, Elena called to check on me. How are you handling the Marcus situation? Better than I expected. It's actually kind of peaceful not getting crisis calls every week. Any word from California? 2 months of silence followed Marcus's California disaster. No calls for help, no text messages, no updates about his situation. I found myself checking my phone more often than I cared to admit, wondering if something terrible had happened to him. But Elena reminded me that silence was probably a good sign. If he were really in trouble, he'd call, she said during one of our weekly conversations. Marcus has never been shy about asking for help when he needs it. She was right, but the quiet still bothered me. 26 years of parenting doesn't turn off just because your child makes bad decisions. I worried about his safety, his housing situation, his ability to survive without his usual financial safety net. The silence was broken on a cold December morning when my phone rang at 6:30. Marcus's name appeared on the screen, and my first thought was that something awful had happened. "Dad, I'm sorry to call so early." His voice sounded different, tired maybe, but calmer than I'd heard in months. "Are you all right? Where are you?" "I'm back in Oregon. I've been here for about 3 weeks." 3 weeks? He'd been back for 3 weeks without calling me? "Where are you staying?" "I found a room to rent near downtown. It's not much, but it's cheap and close to where I work." "You have a job?" "Yeah, I'm working at a warehouse, night shift, loading trucks and moving inventory. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills." A warehouse job? Night shift manual labor? For someone who'd spent the last year avoiding any work that required physical effort, this represented a dramatic change. "How long have you been working there?" "About 5 weeks. Started right after I got back from California." "Why didn't you call sooner?" A long pause. "Honestly, I was embarrassed. The whole California thing was a disaster, and I knew you'd been right about everything. I wanted to get my life together before I talked to you again." This was new. Marcus acknowledging that I'd been right, admitting embarrassment about his choices, taking action to fix his situation without asking for help. I didn't know how to respond. "I'm glad you're safe and working. How are things going overall?" "Better than I expected. The work is hard, but I actually like having a regular schedule. And my coworkers are decent people, not like the guys in California." "What happened out there?" "Let's just say it wasn't the professional gaming opportunity they described. More like a bunch of guys living off their parents' money and pretending to be entrepreneurs." So, Marcus had discovered what I'd suspected all along. The gaming house had been exactly what it sounded like. Unemployed young men avoiding adult responsibilities while calling it a business venture. "I'm sorry it didn't work out." "I'm not. It was a wake-up call. I needed to see what I was turning into." We talked for another 20 minutes. Marcus described his warehouse job, his small apartment, his gradual adjustment to supporting himself entirely through his own labor. He sounded more grounded than I'd heard him since college graduation. "Dad, I want you to know that I'm not streaming anymore. I canceled my accounts, sold most of my gaming equipment, and I'm focusing entirely on real life now." That's a big change. It was time. I spent almost 2 years chasing something that was never going to happen. I'm 26 years old. I can't keep living like a teenager. We made plans to have lunch the following weekend. I hung up feeling cautiously optimistic about Marcus's apparent transformation, but also wary of getting my hopes up too quickly. He'd shown flashes of maturity before, only to abandon them when something more appealing came along. Saturday afternoon found us at a small cafe near downtown Portland. Marcus looked different, more solid somehow. He'd gained some weight, probably from physical work, and his clothes were practical rather than fashionable. The change was subtle but noticeable. "Tell me about the warehouse job," I said after we'd ordered. "It's actually pretty interesting. We handle distribution for several major retailers, so I'm learning about supply chain management, inventory systems, logistics. The pay isn't great, but there's room for advancement if you work hard and learn the business." Room for advancement? Marcus was thinking about career progression in a real job. "Are you enjoying it?" "More than I thought I would. There's something satisfying about physical work, knowing that you've accomplished something concrete at the end of each shift. And you're supporting yourself completely? Rent, food, utilities, everything. It feels good to know that I'm not depending on anyone else." We spent 2 hours talking about his work, his living situation, and his plans for the future. Marcus was different in ways that went beyond just having a job. He seemed more present, more engaged with reality, more aware of how his choices affected other people. "Dad, I owe you an apology," he said as we finished our meal. "For years of treating you like an ATM, for being ungrateful, for acting like your concerns about my future were personal attacks.
You were trying to help me grow up, and I fought you every step of the way. The apology was unexpected and clearly sincere. I appreciate that, Marcus. I know it wasn't easy to hear criticism about choices you were excited about. The criticism was right, though. I was living in a fantasy world, expecting other people to support my dreams while I contributed nothing in return. What changed your mind? California, mostly. Living with those guys showed me what I looked like from the outside. Grown men spending their parents' money on gaming equipment while talking about their potential careers. It was pathetic. And now? Now I'm building something real. It's not exciting or glamorous, but it's mine.
I'm earning my own way, solving my own problems, taking responsibility for my own life. The conversation continued as we walked to our cars. Marcus asked about my work, my health, and my plans for retirement. It was the first time in years that he'd shown genuine interest in my life rather than just my ability to solve his problems. Dad, I know I burned a lot of bridges with my behavior. I'm not expecting things to go back to the way they were immediately, but I hope we can rebuild our relationship on a healthier foundation. I'd like that too, son. We parted with tentative plans to meet again in a few weeks. I drove home thinking about second chances and personal growth, and the possibility that my son might finally be becoming the man I'd hoped he could be. Over the following months, Marcus proved that his transformation was genuine. He worked consistently, received positive reviews from his supervisors, and gradually took on additional responsibilities at the warehouse. Our phone conversations became regular weekly events, and his perspective on work, money, and responsibility continued to mature. By spring, he'd received his first promotion to team leader, which came with a modest pay increase and supervisory duties. He was saving money, maintaining his apartment responsibly, and had even started taking community college courses in business management. "I'm thinking about getting a degree in supply chain management," he told me during one of our dinners. "There's real opportunity in this industry if you understand both the technical and business sides." Supply chain management. Marcus was pursuing education that directly related to his employment and career advancement opportunities. That sounds like a smart plan. How are you managing work and school? It's challenging but doable. The warehouse has tuition assistance for employees who maintain good performance, so I'm getting some help with costs. Tuition assistance that he'd earned through reliable work performance. Marcus was building his future through his own efforts rather than waiting for external rescue. I'm proud of you, son. This is exactly the kind of planning and commitment that leads to real success. Thanks, Dad. I finally understand what you were trying to teach me all those years. By summer, our relationship had reached a new equilibrium. We saw each other regularly, talked openly about work and future plans, and enjoyed each other's company in ways we hadn't since Marcus was in high school. He'd proven that he could maintain steady employment, handle responsibility, and plan for the future like a genuine adult. That's when the gas station incident happened. It was a Tuesday evening in late July when Marcus called with an unusual request. "Dad, I need a favor. My car is making weird noises, and I want to have it checked before it breaks down completely. Could you drive me to the mechanic tomorrow and maybe help me get home afterward?" "Of course. What kind of noises?" "Something in the engine, grinding sounds when I accelerate. I'm worried it might be expensive, but I'd rather deal with it now than get stranded somewhere." This was exactly the kind of responsible thinking that Marcus had developed over the past year, addressing problems proactively instead of waiting for disasters. "I'll pick you up at 8. We can get it looked at first thing." The next morning found us at Peterson's Auto Repair, a shop Marcus had researched and chosen based on online reviews and recommendations from his coworkers. The mechanic, an experienced guy named Frank, diagnosed the problem quickly. "It's your transmission," Frank said after a brief test drive. "Not completely shot, but it's going to need work soon. Maybe $3,000 to $5,000 in repairs." Marcus absorbed this news calmly. "How long can I drive it safely?" "Probably a few more weeks if you're careful, but I wouldn't take any long trips." We discussed options while Marcus calculated costs and timelines. He could afford the repairs, but they would wipe out most of his savings and force him to postpone his college plans for a semester. "What about replacement options?" he asked Frank. "For what you'd spend fixing this one, you could probably find something more reliable, might be smarter long-term." We spent the rest of the morning looking at used cars.
Marcus approached the shopping process methodically, researching reliability ratings, comparing prices, and thinking about how different vehicles would fit his budget and transportation needs. "I think I want to take a day to research this more thoroughly," he said as we finished examining a promising Honda Civic. "This is a big expense, and I want to make sure I'm making the right choice." More responsible thinking. Marcus was resisting impulse purchases and taking time to gather information before making major financial decisions. "That's smart. Why don't we grab lunch and then I'll drive you home so you can do your research?" We stopped at a small diner near the dealership district. Marcus was quiet during the meal, clearly working through the financial implications of unexpected car expenses. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "If you were in my situation, what would you do?" The question showed how much our relationship had changed. Instead of asking for money to solve his problem, Marcus was asking for advice about solving it himself. I think I'd take Frank's suggestion seriously. Putting $5,000 into an aging car might not be the best investment if you can find something more reliable. "That's what I'm thinking too. And if I buy something with a warranty, I'll have more predictable transportation costs." We finished lunch and headed back toward his apartment. Marcus lived in a neighborhood called Riverside Heights, about 40 minutes from downtown in light traffic. The drive took us east on Highway 9, past strip malls and suburban developments that had grown up around Portland's expanding metropolitan area. "Dad, I really appreciate you taking time to help me with this car situation. I know you have your own work to handle. I'm glad I could help. It's nice to be involved in your decision-making process instead of just getting emergency calls. Those days are over. I've learned that planning ahead is a lot less stressful than crisis management." We were about halfway to his apartment when the rain started. Summer thunderstorms in Oregon could be sudden and intense, and this one looked like it was going to be significant. Dark clouds had been building all afternoon, and now they were opening up with the kind of downpour that made driving treacherous. "Maybe we should pull over and wait for this to pass," Marcus suggested as the rain intensified. I slowed down and looked for a safe place to stop. The visibility was getting worse by the minute, and other drivers were starting to pull off the highway. A few miles ahead, I could see the neon sign of Pete's gas station, one of those old-fashioned truck stops that dotted rural highways. "There's a gas station coming up. We can wait there until this storm passes." Pete's gas station looked like it had been there since the 1960s. Two pumps under a faded canopy, a small convenience store with hand-painted signs advertising coffee and lottery tickets, and a parking area that had seen better decades. We pulled in just as the rain reached its peak intensity. "This is really coming down," Marcus said as we sat in the car, watching sheets of water cascade off the gas station's roof. "Probably won't last long. These summer storms usually blow through pretty quickly." We waited for about 10 minutes, watching the storm and talking about Marcus's car situation. The rain was starting to lighten when Marcus's phone rang. "Hey, this is Marcus," he answered. "Yeah, I can talk for a minute." I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but Marcus's expression grew increasingly excited as he listened. "Are you serious? That's amazing. When could this start?" More listening, more excitement. "I understand it's short notice, but this is exactly the kind of opportunity I've been working toward." My stomach began to sink. I'd heard this tone from Marcus before, during his cryptocurrency phase, his dropshipping ventures, his streaming career, the breathless excitement of someone who thought they'd found easy money. "Can I call you back in 15 minutes? I need to arrange some logistics." He hung up and turned to me with the biggest smile I'd seen on his face in months. "Dad, you're not going to believe this. That was my supervisor at the warehouse. Apparently there's this emergency contract that came up, and they need someone to fly to Seattle tonight to help coordinate a major shipment. They want me to handle it." That sounds like a good opportunity. It's incredible. 3 days in Seattle, all expenses paid, plus overtime and a completion bonus. They said if I handled this well, it could lead to a permanent position in their logistics management department. The excitement was familiar, but the context was different. This wasn't a fantasy opportunity based on wishful thinking. This was a real job offering real advancement to someone who'd proven himself through consistent performance. "When do you need to be there?" "Tonight. There's a flight at 8:15, and they need me to be at the Seattle facility first thing tomorrow morning." I checked my watch. It was already 4:30, and Seattle was 3 hours away by car. Even if the rain stopped immediately, getting to the airport in time would be cutting it close. "We should get going then.
You'll need to pack and get to the airport." "Actually, Dad, here's the thing. They're sending a car to pick me up at my apartment at 6, but I need to get back there as quickly as possible to pack and get ready." "Of course, let's go." That's when Marcus's expression changed. The excitement was still there, but now it was mixed with urgency and something else I couldn't identify. "Dad, the thing is, I just realized that if I ride with you all the way back to my apartment, I'll be cutting it really close on time, and if there's any traffic or delays." I was starting to understand where this was going, and I didn't like it. "What are you suggesting?" "Well, I was thinking, what if I called a rideshare from here? I could get picked up directly and go straight to my apartment while you head home. That way, I'd have maximum time to prepare, and you wouldn't have to make the extra drive." A rideshare from a gas station in the middle of nowhere during a thunderstorm, so Marcus could save 20 minutes on his travel time. "Marcus, we're 40 minutes from your apartment. I don't mind driving you home." "I know you don't mind, but this is really important, Dad. This could be the break that changes my whole career trajectory." There it was again, the break that would change everything. The language of someone who still believed in magical solutions to life's challenges. "How much would a rideshare cost from here?" "I don't know, maybe $60 or $70. But Dad, this opportunity could lead to a promotion worth thousands of dollars. The rideshare cost is nothing compared to what this could mean for my future." $60 or $70 to save 20 minutes. For someone who'd been carefully managing his budget and postponing college to save money, this was a dramatic shift in priorities. "Marcus, 20 minutes isn't going to make or break your preparation time. You don't understand. I need to research the client, review the shipment details, pack appropriately, and make sure I have everything I need for 3 days in Seattle. Every minute counts." Every minute counts. But apparently, the money he'd been carefully saving didn't count when weighed against his perception of career opportunity. "If this job is as important as you say, they'll understand if you need a few extra minutes to prepare." "Dad, you're not listening. This is my chance to prove I can handle major responsibilities. I can't show up unprepared or stressed because I was rushing." The conversation was taking on a familiar dynamic. Marcus had identified something he wanted, and my concerns about practicality or cost were being reframed as obstacles to his success. "Let me drive you home, Marcus. We'll get you there with plenty of time to prepare." "Why are you being so stubborn about this? I'm trying to be responsible and professional, and you're making it harder than it needs to be." Stubborn. I was being stubborn by offering to complete the favor he'd originally asked for. "I'm not trying to make anything harder. I'm trying to help you get home safely and affordably." Safely? Dad, it's a rideshare, not a hitchhike. And affordably? This is an investment in my career. An investment in his career. Spending $70 to save 20 minutes was now being classified as professional development. The rain had slowed to a steady drizzle, but it was still coming down hard enough to make driving unpleasant. I looked around Pete's gas station, taking in the cracked pavement, the flickering neon signs, and the general air of abandonment that surrounded the place. "Marcus, let's think about this logically. You called me this morning to ask for help with transportation. I've spent my entire day helping you with car shopping and providing rides. Now you want to spend $70 to avoid 20 minutes in my car. It's not about avoiding time with you, Dad. It's about optimizing my preparation time for an important business opportunity." Optimizing his preparation time. Marcus was using corporate language to justify spending money he didn't have on convenience he didn't need. "How much money do you have in your checking account right now?" The question caught him off guard. What does that have to do with anything? Answer the question. How much money do you have available for unexpected expenses? I don't see why that's relevant. Because an hour ago, you were worried about spending $3,000 on car repairs. Now you want to spend $70 on a rideshare to save 20 minutes. Dad, those are completely different situations. Are they? Both involve spending money you've been carefully saving. Both involve transportation costs. The only difference is that one expense is practical and the other is impulsive. Marcus's excitement was curdling into frustration. This isn't impulsive. This is strategic thinking about career advancement. Strategic thinking would involve getting home efficiently and affordably so you can save your money for actual career investments like education.
"You know what, Dad? I don't need your permission to spend my own money. I'm 26 years old." "You're absolutely right. You don't need my permission, but you did ask for my help, and I'm trying to give you the help you originally requested. The help I need has changed based on new circumstances." "No, Marcus, your priorities have changed based on excitement about a work opportunity. That's not the same thing." The conversation was deteriorating rapidly. Marcus was exhibiting the same pattern of thinking that had characterized his streaming career: immediate gratification disguised as long-term strategy. "Dad, I'm going to call a rideshare. You can drive home whenever you want." "Marcus, wait, let's talk about this." But he was already walking toward the gas station, phone in hand, probably opening a rideshare app. I sat in my car, watching my son disappear into Pete's gas station, and thought about the past year of progress and growth that seemed to be evaporating in real time. 20 minutes later, Marcus came back to the car. "My rideshare will be here in 10 minutes, he said, gathering his jacket and wallet from the passenger seat. "Marcus, I wish you'd reconsider this." "Dad, I appreciate everything you've done today, but I need to handle this my way." "Your way involves spending money you don't have on convenience you don't need. My way involves prioritizing career opportunities over penny pinching." Penny pinching. Fiscal responsibility was now being characterized as an obstacle to professional success. What if this job opportunity isn't what you think it is? "What do you mean?" "What if it's just a routine business trip that you're building up in your mind because you're excited about advancement?" Marcus stared at me through the car window. "Dad, do you ever get tired of being negative about everything I try to do?" "I'm not being negative. I'm being realistic about the difference between genuine opportunities and wishful thinking." "Wishful thinking? This is my actual supervisor offering me actual additional responsibilities with actual advancement potential. And you're celebrating by making the same kind of impulsive financial decisions that got you in trouble during your streaming phase." The comparison hit home. Marcus's expression shifted from frustration to anger. "That's completely different. This is a real job with real opportunities. The job is real. Your response to excitement about the job is exactly the same as your response to excitement about streaming, cryptocurrency, and every other thing you've gotten enthusiastic about. So what? I'm never allowed to be excited about career advancement?"
I have to approach every opportunity with suspicion and pessimism? You're allowed to be excited, but you're also supposed to maintain the judgment and financial discipline you've spent the past year developing. A car was pulling into the gas station parking lot. Marcus checked his phone and confirmed it was his rideshare. "Dad, I don't have time to continue this conversation. I need to go." "Marcus, please, ride home with me. We can talk about this opportunity and plan your preparation together." "I've already called the rideshare. It would be rude to cancel now." Rude to cancel a rideshare, but apparently not rude to abandon the father who'd spent his entire day providing transportation assistance. "This is a mistake, son." "Maybe, but it's my mistake to make." Marcus walked toward the rideshare vehicle, a battered sedan driven by a tired-looking woman who clearly wasn't thrilled about picking someone up at a gas station during a rainstorm. I watched him get into the car and disappear into the storm, leaving me alone under the flickering neon sign of Pete's gas station. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent the past year watching Marcus develop genuine maturity and responsibility, only to see him abandon both the moment something exciting came along. The drive home took 45 minutes, through rain that seemed to match my mood. I kept thinking about the conversation, about Marcus's excitement, about the familiar pattern of impulsive decision-making that I'd hoped he'd outgrown. When I reached my house, I called Janet Morrison. "I want to modify the trust fund again," I told her. "What happened?" I described the gas station incident, Marcus's sudden change in priorities, and his willingness to spend money he didn't have on convenience he didn't need. "Robert, this sounds like a relatively minor incident. He was excited about a work opportunity." "It's not about the money, Janet. It's about the thinking, the impulsive decision-making, the sudden shift in financial priorities, the assumption that excitement justifies abandoning previous commitments. But he does have a real job and legitimate advancement opportunities, which makes this even more concerning.
If he can't maintain responsible thinking when faced with routine business travel, how will he handle actual career pressure or financial independence? Janet was quiet for a moment. What kind of modifications are you considering? I want to extend the employment requirement to 10 years and add financial literacy requirements, maybe community service components too. 10 years is a long time, Robert. So is the rest of his life. If Marcus wants access to inheritance money, he needs to prove he can think long-term and resist impulsive decision-making for a significant period. And if he never meets the requirements, then the money goes to people who understand the value of financial responsibility and long-term planning. We scheduled a meeting for the following week to discuss the modifications in detail. I spent the evening thinking about tough love and enabling behavior and the difference between supporting your child's growth and protecting them from the consequences of their choices. Marcus called the next evening from Seattle. "Dad, I wanted to let you know that everything went well today. The project is exactly what they described, and my supervisor seems really pleased with my work so far. I'm glad it's working out. I also wanted to apologize for yesterday. I know you were trying to help, and I probably seemed ungrateful. You seemed excited about a work opportunity. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But you were right about the rideshare being an unnecessary expense. I could have saved that money and still been perfectly prepared for the trip." This acknowledgement was encouraging, but I'd heard similar admissions from Marcus before, usually followed by repeated instances of the same behavior. "How are things going with the project?" "Really well. I'm learning a lot about logistics coordination and client management. This could definitely lead to more opportunities." "That's wonderful, son. Dad, when I get back, could we have dinner? I'd like to talk about some things." "Of course. Let me know when you're available." We arranged to meet the following Saturday. I hung up feeling cautiously optimistic about Marcus's apparent willingness to reflect on his behavior, but also aware that reflection didn't necessarily translate into lasting change. Saturday's dinner conversation was more encouraging than I'd expected. Marcus seemed genuinely thoughtful about the gas station incident and its implications for his financial decision-making. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began after we'd ordered, "about impulsive spending and excitement affecting my judgment. And I think you were right. I got caught up in the moment and made a decision based on emotion rather than logic. What do you think you should have done differently?" "I should have stuck with the original plan, ridden home with you, saved the money, and used the extra time for preparation if I really needed it." "And what would you do if a similar situation came up again?" Marcus thought about this for a moment. "I'd try to step back and ask myself whether the decision I'm considering is based on rational analysis or just excitement about new opportunities." "That sounds like a good approach." "Dad, I want you to know that I'm committed to maintaining the financial discipline I've developed over the past year. The gas station thing was a lapse in judgment, not a return to my old patterns." "I appreciate that, Marcus, and I hope you understand that my concerns come from wanting to see you succeed long-term." "I do understand that, and I'm grateful that you care enough to call me out when I'm making mistakes." We talked for another hour about his work in Seattle, his plans for continuing education, and his goals for career advancement. Marcus seemed grounded and realistic in his thinking, and his approach to future planning was methodical rather than impulsive. "Dad, can I ask you something personal?" "Sure. Do you think I've really changed, or are you still waiting for me to revert to my old behavior patterns?" The question was perceptive and deserved an honest answer. "I think you've made real progress over the past year. The work ethic, the financial responsibility, the practical thinking, all of that represents genuine growth. But change requires consistent demonstration over time. 1 year of responsible behavior is a good start, but it's not enough to guarantee that the changes are permanent." "How long would be enough?" I thought about the trust fund modifications I'd been considering. "Several years at least, long enough to prove that responsible decision-making has become your default approach to life challenges." "That seems fair. I know I have a lot of ground to make up after years of poor choices." The conversation ended on a positive note, with tentative plans to maintain regular contact and continue rebuilding our relationship. I left the restaurant feeling more optimistic about Marcus's future than I had in years. But the trust fund modifications proceeded as planned. The following week, Janet and I restructured the inheritance to require 10 years of demonstrated financial responsibility, steady employment, and community involvement before Marcus could access any substantial assets. "This is quite a comprehensive program you've designed," Janet observed as we reviewed the final documents. "Marcus has proven he can change his behavior temporarily. Now he needs to prove the changes are permanent. And if he meets all the requirements, then he'll have demonstrated that he's become the kind of person who deserves significant financial inheritance. And if he doesn't, then the money will go to organizations that help other people develop the kind of character traits Marcus never managed to sustain." The documents were finalized and filed. Marcus would inherit a modest amount regardless of his behavior, enough to provide basic security in an emergency. But the bulk of my estate would require him to prove through a decade of consistent choices that he'd truly become a responsible adult. 2 years later, Marcus was still working at the warehouse, had completed his associate degree in business management, and had received several promotions. Our relationship had stabilized into something healthier than it had ever been during his childhood. He called regularly, visited occasionally, and handled his own problems without expecting me to provide financial rescue. But I never told him about the trust fund. Some lessons are best learned through internal motivation rather than external rewards. If Marcus had truly changed, he would continue making responsible choices whether or not inheritance money was waiting for him. And if he hadn't truly changed, well, then the money would go where it could do some actual good in the world. The gas station incident had been a small moment in the larger story of our relationship, but it had clarified something important for both of us. Real change requires consistent demonstration over time, not just temporary improvements in behavior. Marcus had 8 more years to prove he'd learned that lesson. I hoped, for both our sakes, that he had. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.